are you today? So, this live stream is kind of a follow-up to my last live stream, but not really-ish because it's going in a different direction, but I feel like all of the context of my last live stream where I kind of gave a timeline of me getting into the legal field, but I also not only gave that timeline, I discussed legal action against me as well as some of the legal action I've taken on somebody related to a personal injury case of mine. And in the other cases I mentioned were charges against me, but the personal injury case is a charge I pressed on someone else. But yeah, so that kind of timeline and everything like that is kind of like relevant from the background where I'm going to start off today's live stream, because I'm going to use two other forms of legal action that I've taken against one person, or a group of people rather, kind of both collectively and individually, if that makes sense. But yeah, so we'll be going over that a little bit more today as well. And I also do feel I should mention that I did not mention another legal action case put against me related to certain things, but it was really never technically a case, I think, because nothing was ever filed against me. They just threatened to. But I'm going to go over that with how it relates to everything. But that one relates to my whole trigger warning, sexual assault trauma case situation that I want to cover in a different video altogether. So I just feel the need to mention it to say, like, yeah, that's also a part of my history, with my journey in law. But I'm going to actually go into those details in an edited situation, I believe. But that, eventually. So why am I so weird? I don't know. But did I mention how good your hair looks today? And I feel like I should also mention, I've been known for starting my live streams kind of later than I will schedule them for, but my last few live streams, I'm pretty sure the last 3 live streams in a row that I've done, I started those bitches early, so good start for me. But anyway, so today I want to use some of the more recent legal action I've taken against one of my employers as an example of not only that situation itself in a nutshell, but also the obstacles in the way of me filing legal action. I want to talk about cultural organization and work culture and procedures and social norms and things of that nature, and how hard it is to take legal action against an employer, especially if they're an attorney. And so, yeah, I'm going to go over that. And especially if they're an attorney, but especially if they're the managing partner of a fucking law firm that has offices in multiple cities in your state. You know what I mean? Like, anyway. That's why I call it a David and Goliath situation. I'm the little guy. I'm talking about Goliath. There's Goliath in this situation. But I'm gonna ramble a little bit about that at the beginning of this live stream, and work culture and legal action and procedures. And it's kind of like a follow-up of last live stream, but it is going in a different direction. And then after that, we're going to continue my I've been doing like a how to start a startup reaction, I guess. I don't know, because I had watched 12 of these videos about 10 years ago when I was first starting out in business, and I wanted to rewatch this and see how do I feel with value alignment and business alignment with all of the advice that was given then versus my social issues and business experience now. How do I feel about it now? And so a lot of it I still love and agree with wholeheartedly and think it's amazing, And then every now and then there's just certain things that come up where I do have certain criticisms about things that have been said overall, but I'm not going to recap that because I can't remember who the fuck said what, so I don't want to, say the wrong things. But you can watch my other videos to see all of that, and that is linked in the description of this video. I have 2 playlists about the how to start a startup playlist linked in the description of this video. One is just the YC root access videos, I'm just remembering now, I need to remember to link this video we're gonna watch in the description later, because I think I forgot to do that. But anyway, so all of the videos for their entire lecture series in that playlist, without my commentary, just originally from them, in regular speed and all of that is there. And then I have a different playlist where most of those videos I think I watched in 2x speed, and then some of them I think they actually spoke fast, so I watched in like 1.5 or 1.75 times speed or whatever, and then did my commentary. So both of those playlists are linked, both with my commentary and without. And the one with my commentary, I think it's all sped up to various degrees, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I just plan on reacting to 12 of the videos. This is going to be the 10th out of 12 that we do. And the only reason I only plan on doing 12 is because I only watched 12 to begin with, and the whole reason I decided to do this reaction is just to kind of see how I feel about what I was learning a decade ago, and how does that apply with who I am now. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing. So today is just kind of a processing. All of it does relate to marketing, which is why I filed it in a Marketing Monday playlist, because for me, work culture, not only does it pertain to business operations and your day-to-day systems and policies and workflows, but also it's a representation of what you decide you're going to be seen as a collective, And so to that degree, that is a form of marketing. And I feel like in a lot of ways, businesses, they use work culture with relation to marketing. Some of them use it for good and some of them use it for bad, right? So sometimes when so much has happened with an employee and you're actually trying to save face for the employee, because if you talk about all the shit the employee did, it's going to make the employee look bad. You can't just say it wasn't a good culture fit and leave it at that. Sometimes, I feel that there can be productive ways to use this concept. So when I critique it, it's not to say, everything about it is bad. It's just to highlight how I feel it can be misused. Sometimes though, the company will be the one doing fucked up shit, and when employees try to fix the issues, the company will be like, yeah, it's not a work culture fit. And it's because the company doesn't want to admit ways in which they're not following the law or following their own policies. You know what I'm saying? And when employees are like, hey, isn't this in your handbook? Why aren't we following your policy? They're like, you're not a good culture fit, And so, yeah, sometimes I feel like the concept of culture at work, it's not about a productive environment. It's not about the social norms of a place. Well, it can be about the social norms of a place, but it's not about cultivating a sense of community or cultivating a sense of collective organization. It's more about social norms utilized to make you compliant or to just kind of put everybody into a box. You know what I'm saying? It's, that song that's like it's the introduction to Weeds, but I forget the actual name of it, but I just think of it like as the Weeds theme song from that TV show, where it's just like little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, and something about them all being the same or some shit, I don't remember, but it's like that concept, like they all look just the same. It's all just like, it's about making a uniform aesthetic without having actual support. It's kind of like when people develop land and they do like basic construction that looks good on the face value of it, but it's not with good materials and it doesn't last long. For example, I'm just using an example, I don't know, hypothetical shit. Alright, but I'm rambling too much, as per usual. So I am going to roll my intro, and then I'm going to keep rambling, and then we'll do a little lecture reaction. And thank you for your time. Hi, my name is Alexis, also known as Lexi or Deaf Child. I was born deaf, hard of hearing. I began doing business as Deaf Child 2013, marketing 2011, sales 2009. I've earned 50 plus certifications in marketing and sales. I'm a Bachelor of Science from Loyola University, New Orleans, with a music industry studies major and a business administration minor. Deafness runs in my family genetically. Speech is not fully accessible to me. Anyway, I'm here to bitch about whatever the fuck is on my mind. So here we go. Visit my site at noladeafchild.com. Okay, so basically, I want to just kind of start off with speaking on the EEOC filing I did, as well as the complaints I filed to the Louisiana Workforce Commission and what the fuck is it called? The Office of Disciplinary Counsel. And you know, like, because I always, like, to be honest, I really do get like, what is it? The Louisiana Disciplinary Board, Office of Disciplinary Counsel, and then there's like a separate ethics council situation thing too. I get all that shit confused. Like, sorry guys. So if I ever say that interchangeably and say the wrong thing, maybe you know what the fuck I mean. But like, theoretically, I know that labels and semantics do matter for the purpose of clarity. But yeah, like, I fuck all that shit up because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about when it comes to who's, what, where, when, all that. Oops. So yeah, but anyway, fucking, I kind of want to talk about how hard it was to file. And for me, I think that in this entire situation, the not only work culture of the place that I was trying to file on, but the work culture in the places that I was trying to file with, you know, for me, that right there is kind of like what made it harder for me to get any legal action done. And I think that it's a form of marketing because it's all about social optics. And with each company, they all wanted to, on face value, appear as if they were doing community service and fighting for human rights, right? But then each company, whenever you come to them and you say, hey, under the law, this is how I'm impacted by the law, these are ways I'm being discriminated against, these are forms of accommodations I need, then they want to weaponize the concept of professionality and culture and procedure to say, you're not enough, you're not doing enough to have your voice heard, and so we're not going to give you accommodations, and we are not going to make it easy for you to get access, and you can just quit because we don't care about you. It's kind of like how I feel is the concept there, but then they all promote themselves as, oh, we're just following policy, this is the justice system, you know? And so it's just about work culture, because how it ties to marketing versus the reality versus the marketing scripts used in adjustment of the reality, you know? Because each answer you're given, they typically have primed responses for those answers. Sometimes you will be getting a catered response that is curated directly for you, but in a lot of these situations, it's essentially, even if they're not actually using a template, they're still using an essential script that's been pre-approved with your name inserted, you know, like whether or not it's word by word or in other words. My experience from not only the person it's trying to take legal action with my own filings, but also from being the person where I've worked in various offices and I've worked for various corporations in corporate, and you know, like, I've seen how these decisions get made. I've seen how everything comes together, and I know that everywhere I've ever worked, like, you can't just say whatever the fuck you want. Everything is pre-approved. You know what I mean? And it comes to what is being said publicly. You can kind of, depending on the place, some places they do allow you to say basically whatever the fuck you want internally, as long as you're not being problematic, you know, like causing harm to others. other places, they really try to control and dictate everything you say and the representation of everything, no matter what. Um, so yeah, but um, just to ramble about the how hard it was though. Like, so whenever you file an EEOC complaint, the only reason I was able to actually get my EEOC complaint gone through, I believe, is because of how hard it would be to well, because I was they like basically fired me. They, pushed me out. They fired me. And so if they hadn't had fired me, if they had let me come back, and if they hadn't pushed me out of everything, I don't think I would have had time to even take legal action. And if they were willing to understand or learn or educate themselves on these social issues that don't impact them, like perhaps, I understand ignorance, so it wouldn't be like something that I would hold over your head. Everybody struggles with anti-discrimination. I don't hold that over people's head. There's like a fucking fly up in my house, dude. And there are like holes in this, like my doors at this house. And so flies come in and it just bothers me. It's like no matter how much I clean, man. And I got coffee, so they like the sugar. So they're coming to the sugar coffee. But yeah, I don't know. Okay, I'm distracted. But fucking, when you file an EEOC case, so first you have to schedule, like you have to file, well, I had to file online. I had to submit this whole like form thing, whatever the fuck. And then they were gonna decide, they reviewed that to then decide whether or not I could schedule an interview. And then to schedule an interview, I tried scheduling over the phone, but they said I had to come in person. So then I showed up in person to get my appointment scheduled. And then I after that, when they do that, they scheduled it about 3 months later. And within the month before, they make you confirm your appointment twice, and if you don't confirm, you lose your spot. You have to confirm via text and via email at different time periods, is what I had to do. And then on the day of, you better hope that you can be off work and be free that day of to make it to that interview, or your case is closed, dropped. No legal action can be done. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I guess in certain situations, some people, they can just take the day off and say personal time and not really give a reason in certain cases. But what if you don't have any PTO? Or what if they decline your PTO? Like things of that nature. Like, for a lot of people, they can't just get off of work in the hours that the EEOC office is open and get their ass down there. And say they actually get a fucking interview, now they gotta hope that their employer is gonna let them fucking go to it. You know what I mean? Like, there's these obstacles with how hard it is to get your EEOC fucking case filed. And every time you see on TikTok or online, and I agree, it's all fucking bullshit discrimination. Like, fucking I do believe some bullshit should be done, but I'm so jaded about my fucking case that every time I see some bullshit discrimination on TikTok, everybody on the comments are like, go to EEOC, and in my head, I'm like, yeah, like they're gonna fucking do shit, but I don't fucking say that typically. I say typically, I just, like if I do say that, I always try to basically like make it clear, like, this was my experience with the EEOC. If you do want to take legal action, you have to go through the EEOC to do it in most states, I believe, but in the United States, but you don't just expect them to just jump up and help. Like, it does take work just to get them to look at you. And you know what I mean? And I don't think that, like, when the thing was happening with the EEOC, I didn't know what they needed to know to look at my case, and so I gave them everything, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of material. And I think I gave them too much without organizing it properly for them. And so, I don't think that, I mean, I think that they listened to my form case story on case value, but I don't think they went through my evidence. Um, or maybe my evidence is missing because I just couldn't understand, like I got the right to sue letter, but I couldn't understand why they wouldn't want to, like, how it happened the way it did. Like, how the case ended up getting closed and dismissed so quickly. I don't know. But I couldn't find an attorney to take my case. And none of the attorneys I reached out to would even look at my evidence at all. So they wouldn't even tell me if I had a case as it relates to discrimination. And then so I eventually ended up doing my videos on the situation. But I had just done one video. I hadn't done the others when I think when I was basically decided I was going to file the complaint. And the reason I did that was I sent my video I made to people, and one person, because like I was saying, like I don't know the difference between I didn't know the difference between I kind of do, but not really. Fuck that shit up. But I didn't realize there was a difference between the ethics board or whatever the fuck it is and the disciplinary counsel, whatever the fuck that is. I thought that was kind of the same thing. And so I had sent my shit to some people on the ethics board. And yeah, they were like, you should file a complaint with the disciplinary counsel. And I was like, oh, that's what you do? Oh, okay. Complaint time. Yeah, kind of like that. And so yeah, then we filed the complaint. That took me 97 pages. You know what I mean? They don't have an option for you to submit this online. You have to print your letter, and online it does not say that your letter needs to be signed on the website, but apparently it does. Just put that out there. Because they give you two options. You could either print and fill out their form, or it says option number 2, you can just fucking write a letter and send that bitch to them. And so that's what the fuck I did. And I had typed out my name and shit on it, but I didn't print my fucking actually sign my signature. So yeah, so I sent all of that in, and I decided I was gonna FedEx overnight it, and to send the 97 pages, that cost me a good bit of money to print it all and to send it off. And so that's another thing, say somebody wants to file a complaint against an attorney, not everybody has the resources to do so. For me, it was really important for me to get a signed receipt, so I did choose to do the certified, or not, I don't know what the fuck it's called, but the type of sending where they make you sign for it. I did choose to do that because I needed for myself to know that they got it confirmed and not feel gaslit or have any room for them to say, oh, we didn't get that. When people be like, well, somebody signed for this shit, so y'all need to figure out who the fuck that was then. You know what I mean? So yeah. And so whenever I sent that in, about a week later, they emailed me back, basically saying that I needed to sign part of it in order for them to officially recognize it, but they had opened up a complaint, and that they asked me to use a number, the file investigation number, when I was referring. I'm not using the correct words, but whatever, read my mind, you know what the fuck I'm talking about. But they were telling me use this number whenever I correspond on this case. So yeah, I don't know what the fuck's happening with that shit, but we'll see if anything does. I submitted to the Louisiana Workforce Commission as well, and that one was simple to do. It was just online, but I haven't heard anything back from them. And whenever I reached out, they were basically like, we don't really comment on whether or not we have an ongoing investigation. And I was like, great, that's great to fucking know, but what if I'm the one who wants something investigated? They were like, yeah, we can't really do anything. I was like, okay, fine, fuck it. But yeah, so it's very difficult if you want to take legal action, like not only with the EEOC, but also particularly against an attorney, to be heard, to be seen. And if you look at the reasons why, it's because of the work culture at these various places where that is the way it is, because that's how it's supposed to be, I think. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's functioning the way they made it to be. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, so yeah, that was a lot of work for me, not only in amount of time it took to file all of that, but also in the physical labor. I do have a lot of hand pain and a lot of wrist pain from my carpal tunnel and from nerve damage. And my last live stream, I showed you where I had 8 stitches in my finger. And so yeah, and being, having that space off of work when I did have it, and then having the backing of my employer as well whenever I was trying to get my work done to file those complaints, those two things together are the reasons I was able to actually get my complaints filed. If it weren't for that, because of the work culture of my surrounding environments, I don't know if I would have been able to do that, you know? So yeah. Fucking, and a lot of people, I don't think they realize, like, the resources it takes with the deadlines and with the money to make these charges filed. Especially if you're somebody who, like, works at somewhere like a law firm, but you don't have backing financially, and perhaps it takes you longer to get another job in this economy, and you are struggling to get by financially. A lot of people who, most over 50% of the average population would fall into that category, statistically speaking, based on income disparity, to my understanding. So it's like a lot of people, they don't have the resources to take legal action, even if they wanted to, even if they have a valid fucking case, in my opinion. But that's just me. I'm not an attorney. I've worked at a few, I like to, I don't know, sometimes I say a couple, sometimes I say a few law firms, because I technically did work for the third one, but does the third one fucking count? I don't know. Yeah, whatever. If a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? But yeah, fucking, what the hell is wrong with me? I don't know, man. So yeah, I don't know. That's just kind of my ramble for now, I guess. Between, I guess, like how hard it was to file the legal paperwork, the context of my finger pain, and the hours involved in getting that documentation together, being able to have the space and time mentally, either off of work or the support of my work to do it. And then being able to luckily hit those procedures with the deadlines, for the EEOC and everything like that. Like, those were the reasons that I was able to even move my case forward. If work culture at any of these organizations were actually cultivated with a community service focus, I do believe that there would be less conflict when it comes to human rights issues and self-advocacy in the workplace. So yeah, that's just my personal opinion there. And next up, what I would like to do is kind of do a little reaction to lecture 10 on culture. I need to remember to link this lecture in the description of the fucking video, because I keep forgetting. But so this is got the founder of Airbnb, as well as the former CEO of Zappos and Sequoia Capital. Isn't that the Chips dude? So yeah, stuff like that. We're gonna watch this and kind of see, like, what is their take on culture, and reflect on how do we feel about that as it relates to not only business operations but social issues and community bonding, community building. So yeah, fucking I'm gonna be trying this out on 2 times speed to begin with, and then if we need to lower it, I'm gonna lower it from there, and we're just gonna kind of begin our little reaction now.
set the stage with a few slides and some comments, but the main stage is going to be with Brian when he comes up and talks about how he built the Airbnb culture. So you're here, I've been following the presentations, and so now you know how to get started. You've built a team, you started to sort of build your product, it's off the ground, it's growing, people love it, you figured out how to do that, you figured out how to create a very special one-of-a-kind company with monopoly powers that's big, and the market that you're chasing after is slightly bigger.
Okay, I love this little recap he's doing right now of actually the first, all the how to start a startup lectures we've kind of reacted to so far. But where he was speaking on monopolies right here, that was one of the things that I actually disagreed with, and I can't even remember which bitches were talking about that previously, but like I'm literally covering a Google monopoly lawsuit situation. And there's also a Facebook one I want to cover next. So Google has 2 monopoly lawsuits on them. And I've covered all of the, not all of the trial, but all of the trial material I've covered so far is from the Google search monopoly case. They also have an ad technology focused case as it relates. So both of those cases are also related to search engine marketing. But one of them focuses more just on the search engine concept, and the other one focuses more on the ad technology concept. And there's 2 monopoly cases on Google. And I've covered a lot on the search monopoly, and we're going to get to the ad technology next. And there's also a Facebook monopoly case that I want to cover as well. So this advice is from 10 years ago, and I think it comes from following in footsteps of companies such as Google and Facebook and even Microsoft perhaps, because back in, wasn't it like the 90s that they got sued for being a monopoly? Like, I think the advice they are giving is based on what they learned and the advice they were given and how they got by. However, we can see now that it may not be good for long-term sustainability when it comes to some of that advice related to domination in the market using strategies related to monopolization. I think there's nothing wrong with wanting to dominate your market and be a top competitor, because I'm fucking competitive as hell. But if you have to monopolize people to do it, in my opinion, that's not you being the best. You're not the best if you're not competing with because that's you preventing other people from being able to compete. You know, it's kind of like saying, hey, let's race cars, and then before the race you slash their fucking tires. You know what I'm saying? Like, that doesn't make you a better race driver than them, a better racer than them. I would want to actually race against people at their best. That's how I know I'm the fucking best. You know what I'm saying? Like, it takes a weak person who wouldn't be able to succeed otherwise, in my opinion, to have to weaken other people to outperform them, in my opinion. Because if you're actually the best, then you can compete against others at theirs too. But everybody's best fluctuates, and that's also a thing. People don't like the fluctuation of the human condition, I feel. I don't know.
Than the paper airplane business, so you're good, right? So now what? So we're here to submit that actually culture is the thing that's going to be very, very important for you to be able to scale the business as well as your team. And hopefully after this talk, you'll be able to know what is culture, why does it matter, how to sort of create your core values, and think about elements that sort of fit together for the core values and the culture that create a high performance team, and get some best practices for the culture. So what is culture? Anybody want to take a guess at how?
So, okay, for me, my mom is white, European descent. And the reason I just say white European is because, to be honest, if you look at my ancestry, I've literally got some fucking ancestor bitch from every fucking little, like, I'm all of them bitches. I'm French, I'm Spanish, English, I'm Welsh, I'm Irish, you know what I mean? I got some Dutch in me. I've got all of that. I've got it all in me. I got Swedish, you know, like, whatever the fuck. Like, you go into my family tree, you're gonna find a fucking, you know, whatever the modern countries are, you'll find some ancestors from them bitches. But on my dad's side, I'm also indigenous. And he's more Scottish and Irish, and Welsh and English and Spanish. But my mom's got more of the German and some of the other, but you know what? They both got a lot. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm weird. But so that's why I just sum it up just to say fucking white or European, because I'm not fucking naming all those fucking countries all the goddamn time, alright? Like, get the fucking point, okay? But my dad, he's indigenous as well, like mostly indigenous. And um, I feel like the way culture is perceived in both environments is extremely different. Extremely different. So, my dad, our way of life, our culture is our way of life. And our way of life is based on preserving our traditional ways, preserving our traditional values, taking care of the land, and moving in a way which maintains our land, our community, and our ways for the future generations through language, through ceremonies, through dance, through the way we farm, through how we farm, through how we fish, through our ancestral teachings as it relates to art and functional utility making and housing and our political structures. It's about every single aspect of how we organize as a community in order to serve the community, help each other, honor our ancestors, and build a legacy for our future generations, to help our future children keep going in the way of our ancestors. Um, when you ask my mom's side about culture, they're typically going to tell you something more of along the lines of, oh, culture is meant to be shared. They don't understand preservation of culture. They just really think of it as like going out to party, and they don't think of it as a sense of community belonging. They think of it as what can they extract from a situation, you know? Like, they don't think of food in terms of how each community's food is a reflection of their history. They think of food as a commodity. You know what I mean? So but I'm very curious as to what this answer is going to be. But I'm just letting y'all know the reflection of how I see the concept of culture used in white versus indigenous spaces from my own family history.
One should define this.
A set of values in a team?
Yeah, that's good. Did you look that up on the, because you had a computer and internet connection, you just look it up? So these are some definitions.
So the definitions that they're offering, it says the beliefs, customs, arts, etc. of a particular society, group, place, or time. A particular society that has its own beliefs, ways of life, art, etc. A way of thinking, behaving, or working that exists in a place or organization, such as a business. And this also ties into why my first ramble here about my law office. Well, I guess if you count my intro, that wasn't my first ramble, but whatever. Okay, but why the first thing I got into in this live stream, with my ramble about the live stream the law office, that situation, and taking legal action against that attorney and going through the process with the EEOC and with the Louisiana Workforce Commission and with the Office of Disciplinary Counsel. So where it's talking about a way of thinking, behaving, or working that exists in a place or organization such as a business, this concept right here is why I kind of it's connected for me in terms of how I believe the culture of these spaces reflected the experience I had in each one, and why my cultural history, being deaf and indigenous, I feel having those different cultures and going into these white hearing spaces, being deaf indigenous, we are just total opposites culturally. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think that has to be a bad thing, because for me, different perspectives is how you can see different pieces of a puzzle and take more from an experience than you would have if it was just a group of people repeating the same thing. you know? But I think they weren't open to the idea of somebody from another culture in that space, perhaps. Potentially is like something that I've been processing that I feel that I don't know for sure. I'm not speaking on anyone's intentions. I'm only speaking on how I felt. But I don't feel they were open to other cultures in that environment, and that is why it was like if you're not someone who can assimilate there, you're not like, you know what I mean? They just don't value you. And I think that's why, like, a lot of people who are neurodivergent or who are from another community background, which is funny, like, why are we saying indigenous people are from another community background than the colonizers? They're the ones that are from another community background. Like, you immigrated here, my friend, or your ancestors did. You're the immigrant. But, you know, like, so the white European immigrants of America, they don't like to learn the culture of actual Native Americans of the land that they came to, you know? They try to force their own culture onto other people instead. I think that's it. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, so, yeah, let's just keep going. My bad, y'all. My bad.
That you'll find in Webster's dictionary, but we're at Stanford. This is kind of a trick question. It's a CS class. Questions are never straightforward. The real question is, what is company culture going to be? You know, culture that we can generally talk about society, about groups, about places or things. Here we're talking about company culture. And so, how do we want to define company culture? We can take the previous definition and modify it a little bit. And so, this is a hint of how we may want to define company culture. Every day, blank and blank of each member of the team in pursuit of our company blank. And some people have filled these in with different sort of things. The first blank could be assumptions, beliefs, values. My favorite is core values. The second blank for the B blank, people have said behaviors. My favorite sort of answer to that is real action. How do you act? And in pursuit of goals, that's kind of weak. In pursuit of big and hairy, audacious goals, that's a little stronger. But a better definition is in pursuit of a mission. So now that sort of we have that definition, what do we do with it? And why does it matter?
Okay, so what he was saying about a mission a second ago, the reason I paused was because I also think that was part of where I feel that law office I worked at, their work culture, where I feel it's going to cause problems for them there, is so sorry, my mind is crazy. Where they're talking about the mission of the work culture, right? Okay, so they do have like their core values and their mission or whatever that they shove down your throat and shit, but they don't execute the organization of their chain of command through communicating any sort of command or intent of the organization. It's all about communication of a direct order, in my opinion. They care a lot more about if you're going to follow the direct orders no matter what, than if you're going to get the fucking job done. And whether or not the direct order is the right thing to do. You know, they don't want you to question if it's the right thing to do. They want you to just do. But the reason I feel that mindset is a mistake in any company is that can push legal liability from one person to another by saying, well, they're the ones that did it, right? Even if it may be something that's not the correct thing to do. And we're seeing that in the Google lawsuits, where now all these various Google employees who were just following orders are having their names and their careers dragged through the fucking mud in court because they were just doing their fucking job, right? But now they look like people who are engaging in shady business activities because their words are the key pieces of evidence used in Google being sued as a monopoly. So, which is breaking the law. So when you look at things like that, like, I feel there's a difference between, like, if you're the one paying me and I'm like letting you know, like, for example, say you want to make your call to action button red, and I'm like, hey, if you make your call to action button something like blue or green, that usually signals more trust and you might get more clicks. But if it's red, people usually don't click on red or orange buttons as much as they would a blue or green one. I don't know why, but it's the fucking thing. And we can A/B test it and you can see yourself. And if they were like, no, I want the red or orange because I like the way it looks better, I'm like, all right, cool, let's do it. Because you know what? I did my part. I warned them of, hey, you might get less conversions if you do that. They're like, hey, I want to do that anyway. I'm like, you know what? It's your website, not mine. Let me change that color for you. Here it is. It is done, bitch. You know, so if it's a situation, like, I'm the type of person where if it's not hurting me, I'll still follow. Even if I say, hey, I wouldn't do that, I'm going to still do what the fuck you want, right? Like, if you're the one paying me to do it, right? But, so, certain people, though, they don't want to hear whether or not you want a red or an orange button. They're just like, shut the fuck up and make the button red, bitch. You know what I mean? Which is fine to a point because, yeah, like, it's your fucking time that you're paying for. So if you don't want to waste your time that you're paying for on me debating whether or not you should have that button a certain color, totally understand. But on another level, when it comes to certain situations where it's like, somebody is asking you to do something, like say somebody is asking me to market to people who have already asked us not to contact them. That is against the law. And so, I mean, technically it wouldn't be to run an ad to them, but it would be to continue emailing them, for example. And they could be marking you as spam and you wouldn't even go through anyway. But say they marked your email as spam and they requested not to be on the do not contact list, and your boss was trying to get you to email them from another email address, then you could basically be like, that's illegal. And you know, at that point, if they're still basically being like, do what I say anyway, break this law anyway, like, that's kind of like, you know what I mean? They use work culture and the concept of authority and the chain of command in order to weaponize legal liability so they can push it on you. Even if you know or don't know, like, even if you know it's not the right thing to do. I don't know. I'm rambling way too much, but I think you get what the fuck I mean, like, how I got here, maybe. I don't know. I'm gonna try not to ramble too much, but I mean.
And why does it matter? This is a quote from Gandhi: your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions, and your actions become your habits, and your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. If you don't have a good culture in the company, you can't pursue your destiny. What matters is it becomes the first principles that you sort of go back to when you make decisions. It becomes a way to align people on values that matter to the company. It provides a certain level of stability to fall back on, and it provides a level of trust that people can sort of trust each other with. It also gives you a list of things that you should be able to figure out what to do and what not to do. And what the more important thing about that is what not to do. And then finally, the other thing that is important is it allows you to retain the right employees. There are people in this world that are not going to be a fit for your company, but if you have good, strong culture and good, strong core values, you'll know who you want to retain and who you do not want to retain. And if you take the first letter of those, it happens to help you move faster. Another reason, you're thinking that's like all mushy stuff. This is actually more scientific stuff. So here are indices from 1997 to 2003 of stock market index of companies in the S&P 500, in the Russell 3000, and then for the Fortune 100 best companies to work for. They survey all these companies out there, and they picked out companies that they believe are the best companies to work for. And the returns, the stock market returns of those companies happen to be 11.08%, which is almost twice that of the other two indices. And so there's real power in companies that treat their employees well, where there's a lot of trust and where there's a lot of strong culture. So how do you sort of create a set of values and sort of define the culture, et cetera? Get asked that a lot. You got to start with the leader of the company, the founder, and sort of ask yourself, what are the personal values?
So speaking of the leader of the company, right? That is why, so even though in my own legal situation, it was HR emailing me, because I had these previous experiences with the managing partner, and I knew the way he operated in terms of how he was telling me he wanted to know everything about his business, and how he, in my opinion, seemed to want to be in control of everything about it. That is why I feel like the issues I have there are top down. I do feel that perhaps some of the ways I was treated that I have serious issue with were on HR and not him, because of what HR was saying to me specifically in email. Some of the things she said to me, it's just not the way he spoke to me. It's a different way of speaking, and I feel it's the way she was speaking to me, because it just didn't, you know, when you see somebody's words, and it's just like, that's not you, that's somebody else, you know what I mean? Like, you can just tell who is speaking to you by the way they write, based on knowing them, if that makes sense. I want to process this more, but I don't want to do that right now because I don't want to slip up. So I'm going to wait until I process that more to speak on that, I think, again, if I do. Because I don't want to accidentally fuck up and say their names and shit. But yeah, I've been thinking about that, like what was said to me in the emails and how it's a reflection of each person's personality. And she was also telling me though, so some of the things she was telling me, like just throwing insults at me for no reason, I really feel that was just kind of her trying to make me feel small because she didn't have a rebuttal for me questioning her on if she was going to follow their policies or not. So instead of actually following her policies, she tried to demean me, in my opinion, is how I perceived it from what I felt. And I believe that conversation, that part of the conversation, I do believe was her words, her being her to me. Um, but a lot of the other part of the conversation, more particularly at the beginning of it, she kept saying that the managing partners told her this. The managing partner said this. The managing partner. She was putting the responsibility back on him. And so, you know what I'm saying? So I think it was kind of both because I think she got in his head on how to handle it because how he had left it off with me was totally different than what she came back to me with. So some of the issue that I had, and they told me that they talked about me. So I believe some of what happened with me was partly from her influence. But at the end of the day, I do believe he made those final decisions because only he can make the final call on if certain events occurred, you know what I'm saying, at the end of the day, in my opinion. In terms of when I'm aware of that business structure. So anyway, yeah, this part right here is standing out for me too. Because I really do believe your personal values reflect on how your business operates, and that's why I was questioning their values so hard to them in email and in my videos I did on them, particularly in the first video of them. I really was just like, do your values even fucking matter to you based on the way you treated me? Because the way I was treated was not in alignment with what they said to me their policies and values are. And I feel that I tried my best to give them multiple chances to correct that with me without doing any sort of. I never told them, you know, that I was going to go file any reports on them or nothing because I wasn't trying to be any sort of manipulative, no sort of. I wasn't trying to do any sort. What is the word? Ultimatum. I wasn't trying to do anything like that. Like, oh, if you don't do this, I'm going to do that. No, it wasn't like that. And I didn't even want to do it. That wasn't like that day of, I was literally having panic attacks and mental breakdowns, and I showed y'all the video of how it was the next day. And so, you know, I showed you in that video, you can clearly see I'm dissociating. That my intention wasn't, I wasn't trying to go after that business or nothing, and I didn't want to take legal action because I didn't want to negatively impact the business. The reasons I ended up deciding to was because of the way HR and managing partner, but especially HR in those emails, was treating me, and the fraudulent legal paperwork filed really feels unethical to me. And knowing that this attorney admitted in previous legal documentation that he did commit malpractice, but because of the statute of limitations, he wasn't held accountable for it. It was dismissed with prejudice because of statute of limitations, even though in the legal document, I think it was page 10 or 11, it literally says defendants admit that they did the malpractice. So, that they committed the alleged acts. They admitted that they did it. They just, you know what I mean? So I also feel like lack of accountability, and lack of respect for your word and the law. Like, I understand that law doesn't equate to morality, but when people don't honor their word, that's when I have a hard time feeling like that is somebody who should be representing people in the court of law, which is based on honesty and integrity. How can I trust you to represent the truth if I can see clear as day that you are lying? You know what I'm saying? But yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Sorry, guys.
values that are most important to you? What are those things that are most important to the business? Who are the types of people you like working with, and what are their values? And through that, you sort of distill together what a set of values are. Then think about all the people that you've never liked working with. What values do they have? Think of that, the opposite of that, and maybe those should be considered values for your company. And finally, remember, the values have to support your mission. And if it doesn't support your mission, you're missing something. And then the last final checks are they have to be credible and they have to be uniquely tied to your mission. So at Zappos, in terms of uniquely applied to the mission, we were focused on creating a culture that was going to provide great customer service. So the first core value we had was to deliver wow through service. We were very specific that we wanted to deliver great customer service and it was going to be a wow experience. And then below that, we wanted to sort of had a paragraph supporting that, talking about exactly what we mean by that. We want to support them, deliver wow through service, and support people such as our employees, our customers, and our brand partners, and our investors. On terms of the opposite thing, we generally didn't like working with arrogant people. So one of our core values at Zappos was to be humble. So those are two examples where we sort of created core values in a way that sort of became credible and uniquely tied to our mission. So you go through this process, you come up with a few core values. These might be some of them, whether it's honesty, integrity, service, teamwork, and it might be a list of, you might start with 3, you might end up with a list of 10, you might list of 30. It's a good start. And when Zappos went through this process, we started with we asked all the employees at the time what core values they.
I'm just realizing now, I think I got Zappos and Zaps confused at the beginning of this because I'm out of it. Zaps is Louisiana Chips. What the hell is wrong with me? Zappos is the clothing store, right? That's my bad. Oops. But yeah. So theoretically, I really do think that sometimes, companies mapping out what their core values are in this type of way can kind of give people an overall concept of what they can carry into their experience with it. Like if you're a worker, you can take these mindsets into how do you want to carry out your interactions with clients or coworkers or things of that nature. And if you are someone that is going to be a customer or of this business, so to speak, or a client, then perhaps you would then understand what to take away from the experience, what to expect from the people you're engaging with, right? So to a point, I think kind of having some ideas for how you want to represent yourself is really good for businesses because it creates a standard for how you are going to serve others. But on another level, I think a lot of these companies just use this kind of shit as bullshit buzzwords, They're like, we're going to optimize and revolutionize and, it's just it's not, they don't give a fuck about the core values. They're just throwing some shit out there to cover their ass, being like, yeah, we're ethical. And meanwhile, they're in the back forging paperwork. You know what I mean? That type of shit. Or, yeah, I don't know. But anyway.
When I identified with, we came up with 37. We sort of whittled it down to about 10. And it took a year to do this. That's a long time. And you might want to ask why. Well, if you just come up with the word honesty, give me a break. Everybody wants the culture to be honest. No, nobody's going to say, I want to be lied to every day. Service, what do you mean by service? There's got to be a lot more depth in this than that. And everybody talks about teamwork, but there's a difference in level of teamwork that you see in an intramural sports team versus a baseball team. And so how do you sort of dive deeper into teamwork? What are the things that don't work for a team? A lot of it has to do with communications. A lot of it has to do with things that people have studied. And you might want to go deeper into that. At Zappos, we thought about, well, there are a lot of smart people in this room. When they're fighting with each other and trying to figure out who's right and who's not, it's probably not the best use of time. And we wanted everybody to sort of riff off each other and help each other make any idea better. The result is that the company gets a better idea, not that any individual person is right. So we wanted to instill this idea that it's company first, then your department, then your team, then yourself. And how do you do that? You go a level deeper in that. There's a great sort of element of high-performing teams that I really like, which is this pyramid that was created by Patrick Lencioni, and he wrote this book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And
what's interesting? The elements of a high-performing team align with. Have you heard of the STAR method of interviewing? I forget all of the what the fuck it stands for, to be honest, but it's basically supposed to be you're supposed to answer any question that they have with the situation, the task, the actions you took, and the result. And if you answer an interview, starting with what the result was, and then explaining the situation, the task, and the actions you took, then that is a framework a lot of people use in answering interview questions to position themselves as leaders, right? And I think that's interesting with how the STAR interview technique aligns with this elements of high-performing team, because it's talking about trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and results. And the STAR method, in my opinion, kind of bridges those gaps, right? But really, because trust is just, confidence is just trusting in what you're going to say. and trusting in the results, right? And so if you can bridge the gap between trust and conflict resolution, then through commitment and accountability, then you'll have results. That right there aligns with confidence, and it also aligns with the STAR interview technique. So if you kind of, I don't know, processing all of that, like what do these little corporate fucks look for when you're job interviewing? And to me, it's just like when you look at the economy right now, the amount of people getting laid off, the amount of people getting fired, it's just like, holy fuck. But also, no matter what, even if you have a job, we're always interviewing to some degree, because to some degree you're always needing to justify what your work is, right? And so I think always staying on top of like interview tips is good, and keeping your resume and LinkedIn profile up to date is pretty good to do, because it helps you be seen as somebody who is in alignment with what companies are looking for out of producers, in my opinion. I'm rambling too much again, but that's what we're here for anyway. If you want to watch this without my rambles, I forgot to link this video in the description of the video, which I'm going to do later, but the playlist this video is in the description right now.
And the reason this is interesting is he talks about the breakdowns of a team. First of all, a lot of teams break down because they don't have any trust. Then, even if you had trust, why do you need trust? Well, then if you have trust, you can actually have debates and conflict and get to the right answer. If you don't have conflict and debate, people are just, it's the blind leading the blind. How do you know you actually...
Okay, this right here, though, just triggered me, right? So, well, first of all, the concept of blind leading the blind is ableism, because only blind people know what it's like to be blind. So only blind people can explain the blind experience and help blind people with accommodations and things of that nature. But there's nothing wrong with being disabled. What's wrong with blind people leading blind people? That's fucking ableist. Anyway, next up, so that concept is, comes from discrimination. But where it comes to trust and conflict resolution, I was trying to have conflict resolution with that managing partner because I decided I was just going to trust the situation. He was pushing me so hard to tell him what was on my mind, and I was trying to actually just focus on work. And if I could have just focused on work, I think I would have been fine in like 5 fucking seconds, because whenever I'm upset, it's just on my fucking face. But I'll get over it in a minute. Like, you know what I mean? But instead of that, of like letting me like just let it pass, he kept pushing me. And it was the week of my mother's birthday, so I'm already got my own issues with that shit, and it was just not a good week for me. So I was trying not to talk about my issues. Instead, I was trying to focus on work, and he was pressuring me, and I was trying to tell him I haven't processed, like, is this me with where I'm at in my life, or is this like what is happening, because I had seen certain events in the workplace that had concerned me. So I was telling him I hadn't processed if it's this workplace, if it's me in this moment, which I think it was kind of like a mix in some ways, or if it was just like I was telling him, like, I don't feel like I can talk to you. I'm just trying to talk to you. I just wanted to be able to express myself, right? Because I was just going to try and trust. Like, I don't want to be somewhere where I can't trust you. And so I just wanted to go ahead and try and trust the situation and give him a chance, because why am I going to push my past negativity onto a new experience? I give each new experience a new chance. Like, even if I'm recognizing the patterns of my past, I try not to push that on, even if I'm processing it. But yeah, like, I feel like perhaps because I was new, they didn't trust me, and that's why there was no conflict resolution. But it's like, why would you hire someone if you don't trust them anyway? But I guess that's, why they fired me. But then it's just like, why would you fire me and then put that I resigned when I didn't resign on legal paperwork? And I can prove I never resigned. I can prove I was fired in writing. The HR even said in writing they wanted me gone. So, yeah, I don't know. Okay, I'm thinking about that. But anyway, because that company isn't built off a place of trust, though, I don't think they're gonna get to where they could be until they resolve that. Until they come from a place of trust building, I don't think they're going to be able to resolve conflict resolution. And I don't think that their team members are committed to them. I think their team members are only committed to them as it relates to how hard it is to go find another job. But if the job market were easier, I don't think they had accountability based on the way they treated me. And I think that is how we have with the results we have today. But anyway, I'm sorry. I'm fucking spiraling on that shit. I don't know why I'm ruminating today. I guess I just kind of woke up a little angry. Oopsie.
You got to the right answer before you sort of commit to something. So people are not actually willing to commit. They're afraid of committing. And so let's say you get to the next level and you're actually able to commit. Well, what goes wrong then? It's usually because people are not held accountable to things that they committed to. And if people are not held accountable to the things that they've committed to, then they can't get results. And I would submit to you, if you think about the company as a black box, and
okay, sorry, I'm here again. That's another thing. I think I would have more results in my life if I were putting myself in places where I was more committed. And I think also when I have tried to commit to places that weren't committing back to me, that burned me out so much that I then showed up less in spaces that were trying to commit to me. I think it's all connected.
And results, whether it's financial, whether you produce a great product, or anything like that as the output, one of the major inputs is the culture of the company. So some other best practices we're going to actually talk about during Q&A, because I think this is going to blend into the conversation, is that you want to incorporate your missions and values. We talked about that. Performance, you got to think harder, deeper, longer about your values than you might initially think you need to do. One of the things that I think a lot of companies don't actually do is they interview for technical fit or skill fit or competency in that realm, but they don't actually interview for the culture fit and whether someone will actually believe and follow the mission. I think that's a big, big no-no. Like, I think you can have the smartest engineer in the world, but if they don't believe in your mission, they're not going to pour their heart and soul into it. And that's one of the things that where if you actually sort of start thinking about culture from the interview process to performance reviews to making sure that's a daily habit, you'll get a lot further with making a great culture. The final point on making a daily habit, I think culture, just like customer service or fitness, is like motherhood and apple pie. Everybody wants to provide great customer service. Every company wants to have a great culture. What they fail to do is make it a daily habit. You just can't be fit if you don't do it as a daily habit. Eventually you get out of shape, then you get fat, and then you're like, oh, I got to go on a crash diet to sort of get back into shape. That doesn't quite work. And the same is true with something like culture. So I think we checked all of these off, so we can go into Q&A with Brian.
All right, hello everybody. It's quiet in here. I'll be honest. No, it's much better. Now I feel a little less on edge. Nothing worse than like a room full of people really, really quiet staring at you, but now I feel better.
Oh, I did it for 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
You could bear for a little
yes,
longer.
Exactly.
So Brian, could you talk about the process by which you came to understand the culture was important to Airbnb and in building the company?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we realized is, so just to give you, I won't tell the full story of Airbnb, and some of you may know it, but the very short version of the story was that Airbnb wasn't meant to be like the company we were trying to start. I had quit my job. I was living in LA. One day I drove to San Francisco, became roommates with my friend from college, went to around school design, Joe Gebbia, and I had $1,000 at the bank, and the rent was $1,150. So that weekend, this international design conference was coming to San Francisco. All the hotels were sold out. We decided, let's just turn our house into a bed and breakfast for the conference. I didn't have any beds. Joe had 3 air beds. We pulled them out of the closet. We called it the air bed and breakfast. That's how the company started. I probably told that story 10,000 times, by the way, some version of that story, and I didn't think I'd ever tell that a second time. When I remember growing up, I also went to college, and my parents were social workers, and they had kind of been nervous about me going to art school. They kind of worried that maybe I would like not get a job after college, which I'm sure a lot of parents worried about. So she said, make sure you promise me you get a job of health insurance. I ended up starting airbedandbreakfast.com as original name. She remember her telling me, I guess you never got that job of health insurance. The reason I say this though is this: Airbnb was never meant to be the big idea. It was meant to be the thing to pay the rent, so we could think of the big idea. And along the way, by solving our own problem, it became the big idea. So alongside that, and I'm not going to talk about like kind of how we build a product. That's probably another conversation that some other people are talking about. You have to build a team in a great company. And in the early days, we had 3 co-founders, Joe, Nate, and myself. And I kind of think of one of the reasons we're successful was I was really lucky. And I don't think I was really lucky because we came up with the idea of Airbnb. I don't think we were really lucky that we became successful once we had a team. I think we could have come up with a lot of ideas and been so successful. I think I was lucky because I found 2 great people that I wanted to start a company with. People I admired that almost intimidated me how talented, how smart they were. And I think that's one of the first things. You got to build a team that's so talented that they kind of almost make you slightly uncomfortable because they know by being with them, you're going to have to raise your game to be with them. And then when we were working together in the early days, this is like 2008, the first thing is we were like a family. You think about founders. Founders are like parents and the company's a child. And the child will manifest in many ways behaviors that parents have between the relationship. If the parents are dysfunctional, they're not working together, then the child's going to be frankly pretty fucked up. And so you don't want that. You want your culture to be awesome. And so Jonah and I were like total family in the beginning. We worked 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. I remember we were Combinator. We like worked together. We like ate food together. We like even went to the gym together. We may as well have done jumpsuits. We didn't go that far. But we were like, it was like we were a mission. I felt like we were like special forces or something. And we had this like amazing shared way of doing things with amazing accountability.
So a lot of people, I know to a point that having a personal work-life balance is important, because without that, to a certain point, without certain boundaries, when it's just overlap, you can get burned out because you'll never not be working if you don't have a difference to some degree between your work and business life. On another level though, I don't believe in too much of a separation between my work and my business life because my work is my life. I love my work. It's my passion. It's what I pour my heart and soul into. And whenever I'm with my coworkers, like, you spend so many hours with these people. Whether or not I like these bitches, some of them I do, some of them I don't. You know, in the past with all my history of working, that's still, it's kind of like, you know, when you go to school and, like, whether or not you like all of your classmates, you all have a common community, you all have shared experiences, and you do build and share and live your life together, and that does mean something, you know. And I think a lot of people don't value their coworkers, whether or not they're your subordinates, or whether or not, like, whether or not you're the boss or their boss, or whether or not they're your boss, you know, whichever way it is. A lot of people don't value like any sort of team building with their community. And I think if people got to know each other, they would actually work better together because they would understand the way each other thinks and how we operate and how we process information in order to better communicate to each other and in order to better be productive together, and help each other problem solve as well, because people with different ways of thinking can approach problems differently and get different results, which can be beneficial to have the option and the utility of multiple results from an issue, you know. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like a lot of people, it's like one way or the highway, you know? And I think that we live in a world where it's, you know, I'm used to four directional thinking, like just thinking about it from multiple angles, not just looking at it from one way of thinking. I don't know. I'm being weird, but yeah.
And then we realized that was like the DNA of the company. And then we started thinking, at some point you go from building the product to phase two, which is building the company that builds the product. And so a lot of the talk is about how do you build a product, how do you get product market fit. Once people start doing that, now you've got to build a company. And it doesn't matter how great your original product idea is. If you can't build a great company, then your product will not endure. And so we thought about this, and one of the things we realized, we want to build a company for the long term. The last thing I want is to build something. I mean, think about it this way. If your company's like your child, a parent wants his child to outlive him or her. It would be a tragedy to outlive your child. It also, I felt like, be a tragedy for us to outlive our company and just watch it rise and fall. We didn't want that. We wanted a company that would endure. And so to do that, we started noticing companies had something in common. Companies that were around for a really long time had a clear mission, and they had a clear sense of values. They had a shared way of doing something that was unique to them and was really, really special. And so then Joni and I, when we were three people, decided to look around companies. I noticed Apple, you know, Steve Jobs talked about core value was that he believed people with passion could change the world, and he said our products changed, but our value never had. And we learned about Amazon, we learned about Nike, we learned about companies in the early days. You can even use this to talk about organizations. You know, even like a founding of a nation has strong values and a declaration, then the country might endure longer. And so we started realizing, like, we need to have intention. Culture needs to be designed. And that's kind of how we got connected, is because you know, we were funded by Sequoia. Alfred Lin had just joined from Zappos Sequoia, and I was told Zappos had an amazing culture, and we went to Las Vegas and met up with Tony, and we learned about it.
And so what did you learn?
Well, you guys are crazy. The thing we learned, and we were three people, was you need to have, like, culture's a shared way of doing things. There's really two parts. One is behaviors, and those can kind of change, and maybe 50 years from now, there will be rituals and behaviors that will change, be different. But there have to be some things that never change, some principles, some ideas that endure, that make you, you. And I think of core values as integrity, honesty. Those aren't core values, because they're values everyone should have. They're like integrity values. But there have to be like 3, 5, 6 things that are unique to you. You could probably think about this in your life. What is different about you than every single other person? If you could only tell somebody 3 or 4 things, what do you want them to know about you? And we realized that when Zappos was 100 employees, they wrote down these 10 core values. And the only thing I learned from Tony is he said, I wish I didn't wait till I was 100 employees to write down a core value. So I think I was talking to Sam, he said he thinks we're one of the only companies that wrote our core values down before we hired anyone.
How long did it take you to hire your first employee?
So our first employee was our first engineer, and I think we looked for him for 4 or 5 months, and I probably looked through thousands of people and interviewed hundreds of people.
And by then, when you hired, when did you write it? Did you write it on day one, or it was in month 3?
I think we started working on it around the time of Y Combinator, which would have been January 2009. It was probably a process that evolved over the course of 6 to 7 months. We finished Y Combinator in April 2009. I think we hired our first engineer in July, something like that.
So where they keep talking about Y Combinator, YC Root Access changed their name. They were formerly Y Combinator, now they're YC Root Access. Y Combinator or YC Root Access, they kind of have like 2 sides to them, to my understanding. On one side, they're an educational platform from Stanford University where they had this lecture series, you know, that we're watching today. And then on this other side, they are a program where they help people who are starting up businesses get their paperwork together, their funding together, and everything like that in order to launch and be productive and things of that nature, if I understand correctly, and blah, 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 blah. But I just wanted to clarify that because they're talking about Y Combinator now, so in case you're like, what the fuck is that? It's from the YC, they're YC Root Access. The playlist we're watching now, they used to be Y Combinator. Anyway, but yeah. And I like what he was saying basically about how like honesty and integrity and all that bullshit is basic fucking shit that shouldn't be a core value of yours. Because that's honestly kind of how I feel. That's my critique about the core values of that law office I keep bitching about. Because that's the type of shit that is their core values. It's just like, yeah, shouldn't you already have that? That's expected. It's like going to a law office and them saying, our value is to do law. Like, yeah, isn't that what the fuck you're supposed to do? That's a baseline expectation. I don't know. I'm weird.
Probably like 6 months. And because some people ask, like, why did you spend so much time on like hiring your first engineer? And here's what we thought about it. I kind of felt like your first engineer was like bringing in DNA to your company. This person was gonna like, there were gonna be, if we were successful, there were gonna be 1,000 people just like him or her in the company. And so it wasn't a matter of like getting somebody to build the next 3 features that we needed to ship for our users. There was something much more long-term, much more enduring, which was, do I want to work with 100 or 1,000 more people like this? Now you want diversity, but you want diversity of like beliefs. You want diversity of like background, age. You don't want diversity of values. You want very, very homogenous beliefs, and that's the one thing that shouldn't be diverse.
So what are Airbnb's values?
So we have 6 core values. I'll maybe talk about 3 of them.
Okay, to be honest, I don't know if it's because I have this on 2 times speed or because of my processing today, but he was basically saying, was he saying, I'm not going back. All right, I'm just asking. I'm not even fucking going back. Fuck it. I think he was saying that you should not be trying to have a homogenous value, right? Like he was saying there should be diversity, if I understood that correctly. That I agree with. And that is my critique of my law firm, of that, not my law firm, of my issue with that law firm, if I'm wording that all correctly, if I understood that correctly, right? Like they didn't care about a diversity in the value system there. They were very rigid with wanting everybody to sort of, like everybody there every day was just like it was weird. Because, okay, so I'm somebody who, I really do appreciate good bosses, and I really do appreciate mentorship, and I appreciate my coworkers and being in meetings and being able to share my experience at places. So I wrote a card and a poem for my last boss. The fuck, the capture did not get that right. I said poem, P-O-E-M. It's not putting M on there. But anyway, P-O-E-M. Poem. I don't say it right because I'm from fucking Mississippi. So whatever, fuck it. I don't say poem or pinch right. Suck my dick. Anyway, or if you're from Mississippi, maybe you say it like me. But, yeah, so, I wrote her a poem about how much I valued her mentorship and how, I valued her approach as my coach. You know, and so, yeah, because I do enjoy showing appreciation whenever you're actually mentoring me and helping me in my career. I definitely enjoy showing appreciation for that. But it was like this weird situation where every single meeting they had, they were just really, every single person would go around the table and basically suck this dude's dick metaphorically and basically be like, yeah, I'm so grateful for this job every fucking day. I'm like, you've all been here for years. Why are you still telling him you're grateful for this job every fucking day? I'm sorry. But even no matter how grateful I am for a fucking job, like, okay, it's one thing is there. It's different. Like if someone cooks me a meal every single fucking day that they cook me a meal, I'm gonna tell them I'm grateful for that meal because they put in so much labor to cook that for me every day, right? Or every single meal they cook for me, I'm gonna tell them I'm grateful. So to a point, I think it's good to regularly express appreciation for the labor someone is doing to you, right? Doing for you. But on another level, if you're telling your boss every single fucking day how grateful that you are that you have the opportunity to work for them, it felt like a cult. It didn't feel genuine. Like, was I supposed to say that too? What? It was weird. I need to process that more, but it was fucking weird, man. It was weird. And then they got all of these people to leave reviews on the same fucking week on Indeed that I previously covered. And I thought that was weird too, man. And another thing, I like to wait until after I leave somewhere to leave my work review if I'm going to leave one. because I want it to actually reflect my entire experience there, not just one part of my experience. So, but they had people who literally just started because the review was left shortly after I was fired. And that person was for my position. And I just believe it was potentially my replacement. And if it was, then that person couldn't have been there long enough to have given an accurate review, in my opinion. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong for thinking that, because how long you are there doesn't change what your experience is. You know, you could spend 5 minutes somewhere and have a valid review, I think. But there's just something about when you haven't been somewhere that long and you're expressing a certain amount of it's because there's like a difference between complimenting somebody versus putting together like adjective sandwiches and basically being like, yeah, this man walks on water. It's fucking Jesus. I would kiss the ground he walks on. Let's wash his feet. Like, type shit. You know? Am I weird for thinking that? Am I weird for comparing it to that? I don't know. It just felt weird to me. It didn't feel genuine. It felt like it was a forced script, and it felt like every time before somebody would say something, they look around to make sure that what they're saying is okay to say. And like, whenever the HR person was speaking, it was worse than Toby in The Office. Like, dude, I felt so Michael Scott there too, man. Like, it was, but not Michael Scott in terms of I don't act like Michael Scott with political beliefs, but in terms of like every time he saw Toby, he was like, "Oh God, that's me with the HR bitch there," because now I get it. Now I get why he hates HR. But fucking yeah, no, I don't know. Like, so everything that she would say though, like, there was no personality, no emotions, no personality in anything she says to you ever. Um, she talks just like this, and she looks at you just like this. I went to lunch with her, and the entire time she ate a salad, and she looked at me, and she talked to me just like this. I was telling her about watching a plant. I forgot the name of the type of plant it was, but there's a plant. It's similar to the agave family, if I'm not mistaken. But is it agave? I don't think it's agave. It's in the agave family. But there's a plant where it only flowers one time in its entire life before it dies. And I was watching this plant flower, like, because it starts to bloom and blossom for about a month, and then it peaks, and then it passes away. And so I was telling her about this fucking plant I was watching, like, that I was obsessed with, and like I'm like over here like, yeah, man, and there's more flowers blooming. I'm so proud of this plant. And she was like, okay, you are watching a plant. And I'm like, yeah. And she was like, I don't know. It was fucking weird. There was no connection. And that's some white people shit, man. Like, cause if you go talk to a native person, like, hey, man, come look at my fucking plant. They're gonna be like, let's talk about Three Sisters. Where you farming? Like, you know what I mean? Like, but if you go talk to white people, like, hey, white people, look at my plant. They're like, all right, fucking freak. I don't know, man. I don't know if it's a cultural divide or what, but it was just like, and then in the meetings, she was like updating, for example, on new HR policies, you know, like new work from home days will be rolling out. Like, the way she talks is so robotic. And I understand to a point HR needs to remain professional, but the HR rep when I worked at the last place I worked for at corporate, the HR reps there are fucking incredible. Incredible. She could learn from them. She could really learn from them. Anyway, like the way they handle situations. So, there was a regional director that got ousted while I was working there. I had nothing to do with that shit, man, because I just worked there at the time, but I had nothing to do with that shit. But there was a regional director that was basically ousted while I was working there, and allegedly he may have been discriminating racially against certain members of the community, and he was also drinking on the job. He was also messing with the accounts, and I don't want to say too much on that for legal liability purposes, but and he was also he was just doing a bunch of things he should not have been doing. And so eventually it got to the point where corporate came down, and they had the president of the company, the vice president of the company, legal, and HR in the office. And they were all basically deciding whether or not to give him another chance or to fire him. And so they interviewed each person individually, and they interviewed my boss and I together because we're a tag team. We came together. We were just like, but watching my boss handle that situation actually taught me something, because she didn't think he was a good fit to be there necessarily based on certain things that had happened, but at the same time she didn't think her opinion should necessarily be a reflection of the outcome, because she didn't have to work with him really. We just worked at the same place. And so basically what she told corporate though was, do you think, based on what the team is discussing with you, that they will ever respect him? And fact, and that's kind of how she approached it. She wasn't sitting there like, fuck that dude, man. Instead, she said, do you think he will be able to effectively lead the organization based on how he is perceived by the organization? And I watched her navigate that problem that way. And so that taught me a lot about how to address leadership concerns whenever you can show the evidence for multiple witnesses testifying to certain events occurring and things of that nature. And so then, the way HR handled that, the way the way that they communicate in order to get that information, they're not robotic. Whenever you have benefits, for example, I my benefit enrollment opened up and I missed my opportunity to enroll on time, but she emailed me. She was like, "Hey, you missed your window, but we can still get you in. Do you want to enroll? Here's what we can do for you." She talked to me like I was a person. It wasn't robotic. When she asked me about what am I doing, and I talk about what am I cooking, oh, she's gonna comment on the recipe and discuss, what is she gonna eat. She doesn't, she won't, the HR rep at that law office, they'll ask you a question and then look at you like you're a freak and not say anything and then act like you're fucking weird. Versus the HR rep at this other organization, they actually conversate with you. And I think that they actually got more information out of the organization about what happened with that regional director with that approach than they would have if everybody was scared to talk to them, And so I actually think that when you operate in that way, it really does make it difficult to effectively do your job as an HR representative, because you can't effectively protect the company from issues if you're just sweeping it under the rug or trying to sweep it out the door. That's not actually resolving a conflict, and it doesn't make the company look good. It's you becoming the liability, in my opinion. That's just me. Everybody operates differently. So yeah, dude, we're not even 20 minutes in, and I spent an hour bitching. Oops. Yeah, my bad.
So our first core value we talk about is champion the mission. And what it really means is that we want to hire people that are here for a mission. We don't want people here because they think we've got a great valuation, they like our office design, they need a job, or they think it's hot. We want people to be here for the one thing that will never change, and that's our mission. And just to tell you a quick story about our mission, Airbnb, a lot of people describe it as a way to book a room or book a house and you travel around the world, and that's what we do. But that's not at all why we do it. And to answer the question of like what our mission is, I'll just tell you a quick story, and this I think describes it. In early 2012, I met a host named Sebastian. So we do these meetups around the world where we meet with hosts. I meet this host named Sebastian. He's probably like late 50s. He lives in North London. And Sebastian looks at me and says, Brian, there's this word you never use on your website. And I said, what's that word? He said, that word is friendship. I would love to tell you a story about friendship. I said, okay, tell me the story about friendship. He said 6 months ago, the London riots broke out outside my home, and I was very scared. And the next day, my mom called me to make sure I was okay. He said, yeah, Mom, I'm okay. And she goes, what about the house? And he says, well, yeah, the house is okay as well. He said, here's the interesting thing. Between the time the riots broke out and the time my mom called me was a 24-hour window of time. And in that period of time, he said 7 of my previous Airbnb guests called me just to make sure I was okay. He said, think about that. 7 of my guests called me before my own mother did. I don't know what that says about our guest or his mother more, but in this summer, on a typical night or a peak night, we would have 425,000 people staying in homes and living together, and they were coming from 190 countries in the world, which is every country but North Korea, Iran, Syria, and Cuba. So when you hear that story, at our core, what we're about, that's much more than just booking a room or traveling. What we are about is we want to help bring the world together, and we want to do that by giving a sense of belonging anywhere you go. So our mission is to belong anywhere. So 5 years from now, 20 years from now, maybe we're still selling rooms and homes, but maybe we're not. But I can guarantee you what we're always going to be about is a sense of belonging and bringing people together, and that's the more enduring idea. So when we hire people, the first thing you need to make sure is if that's our mission, you need to champion that mission. You champion the mission by living the mission. Do you believe in it? Do you have stories about it? Have you used the product? Would you believe for the product? I used to ask like crazy questions. Like one of the crazy questions Sam reminds me of is I used to interview people. So I interviewed the first 300 employees at Airbnb, which people think I'm like really neurotic, and that may also be true. But and I used to ask them a question, which I've now amended. I used to ask them, if you had a year left to live, would you take this job? And actually, the people who say yes to that you probably don't like, because that's like they should spend time with your family. So I amended it to 10 years, because I feel like if you knew you had 10 years left to live, whatever you want, what you would do in those last 10 years, you should just do. And I really want people to think about that. That was enough time for like you to do something you really cared about. And the answer doesn't have to be this company. And I say, fine, if what you're meant to do is to travel, or you're meant to do is start a company, you should just do that. Don't come here, go do that. And so there's this whole kind of parable, probably many of you heard of it, about like 2 men are laying bricks. Somebody comes up to the first man, says, what are you doing? He says, I'm building a wall. He asks the other guy, what are you doing? He says, I'm building a cathedral. There's a job, and then there's a calling. And we want to hire people aren't just looking for jobs, they're looking for a calling. And that's kind of the first value, and that's championing the mission. I'll just, maybe because I want to take all the time, I'll talk about just one more.
You see, and I'm back to the situation again, because I feel like at that law office, they're not looking for people who feel a calling for the field. They're just looking for people to fill the position. They don't give a fuck about what your connection to it is. They don't want a connection. Or at least that's how I felt there. Like, I felt there, like, any type of human connection was not encouraged. It was very severed, actually. It was all, like, their idea of professionalism isn't about the quality of the response or the quality of the service or even the tone, in my opinion. It was about whether or not you are sucking their metaphorical dick. You know what I mean? Like, it was just, I don't know. That's just how I feel like there was just this misalignment, you know? Like, I was looking for a place to work on my passion and to, like, you know what I mean? I don't know. Like, for me, the legal field isn't just the job. You know what I mean? But to them, I think it was. Like, I think they saw that position as just a job to fill. They don't see it as a person with a calling to elevate their role, elevate their career, or grow the practice. You know, they just see it as a pawn to execute other people's tasks, in my opinion. And I think that's also, like, going into it, why we didn't see how we moved the same, you know? We didn't have that alignment because they don't think that way like I do, I think. Or I don't know, I'm just like, honestly, because I felt like I didn't get to have any sort of communication with them about what the issues could be. From there, I'm just processing and reflecting and self-projecting what I think it could be. Because that's all I can really do. Like, it's very one-sided reflection over here, but yeah, I think you can see in my writing where I did attempt to get their opinion. But I just don't feel that I was ever given clarity on that.
So we don't talk about those values. The second value relates to being kind of creative and frugal, and I'll tell you a story. Our company was like, by the way, all the founding stories of your company end up becoming the things that people repeat and talk about when you're 1,000 people, and it kind of embodies, right? It's kind of like your childhood. These things kind of come back later in life. Same thing with a company. So Airbnb, I think Mark and Jason said last talk, that was like the worst idea that ever worked. And it really probably was the worst. I mean, people thought we were crazy. I remember telling people about the idea, and I remember actually telling Paul Graham, I said, we had this idea, in our interview, we said, we have this idea, it's called Airbnb. He goes, people actually doing this? I go, yeah. His follow-up question was, what's wrong with them? So I knew the interview wasn't going well. And in the interview, at the end of the interview, Paul Graham, I think, wasn't going to accept us. But we told him this story, how he funded the company, and here's how it goes. We were introduced, Michael Seibel, who I think is a partner of Y Combinator, people know, introduced me and Joe to like 15 investors in the Valley, including some of the ones that have been here. And all of them like said no to the company. They could have bought 10% of the company for like $100,000, $150,000. They all said no. They thought it was a crazy idea. No one would ever stay in someone's home. So we ended up just funding the company with credit cards. And you know those binders kids used to put baseball cards in? So we put credit cards in those because we had to put them all somewhere. That's how many credit cards we had, and we were completely in debt. And in the fall of 2008, we provided housing for the Democratic and Republican National Convention, and we had this weird, crazy idea because we weren't really selling a lot of homes. So basically, Airbnb launched, and a year after we launched, I think we had 100 people a day visiting our website. And we had like 2 bookings, which is generally bad. It's kind of like releasing a song, and a year later, like 3 people listen to it every day. Like, it's probably not going to be a very popular song. So, but I believed in it. Joe and Nate believed in it. But and so we were completely in debt. We don't know what to do. And so we get this idea. Well, we're Air Bed and Breakfast. We're providing housing for the Democratic and Republican National Conventions. What if we made like a collectible breakfast cereal for like the Democratic National Convention? And we came up with this Barack Obama themed cereal. We called it Obama O's, the breakfast of change. And then we came up with a Republican themed cereal for John McCain. We found out he's a Captain Navy, so we came up with Captain McCain's, a Maverick in every bite. And we had $0, and without any money, we were able to, we tried to call like General Mills, and they told us to like stop calling them, or they're getting restraining orders, so that didn't work. But we found a local alumni of RISD. He made 1,000 boxes of cereal for us, and we ended up sending them to press, and eventually within a week, we got on national television, national news. We made $40,000 selling breakfast cereal. And that, the year 2008, we made $5,000 from our website, and we made $40,000 selling breakfast cereal. And I remember my mom asking, so are you a cereal company now? And that wasn't the bad part. The bad part was the honest answer, which was, well, yeah, technically yes. So, but the reason I tell that is our second core value is to be a serial entrepreneur. I'm sorry for the cheesy pun. I'm sorry. But be a serial entrepreneur. And we really mean is that we believe constraints bring out creativity. And when you raise like $800 million, suddenly all that scrappiness, it's easy to lose that scrappiness. It's easier for people to tell you, I just need like this $50,000 contract, or I need this, or I need that. And whenever somebody is just being a little bit not like frugal and not being creative, or they tell me they can't do something, I'll just take a box of cereal. And like, even just the suggestion of Obama's knows you need to be scrappy and frugal.
You know, another thing that's just triggered for me though, you know, he was talking about like a lot of people may lose their scrappiness if they get a large amount of funding. I think that can be the same with like people who are managing large marketing budgets for the first time. They lose their scrappiness and their frugality. And when it comes to managing that budget, a lot of people that I see in marketing, whether or not they're the marketer, just anyone engaging in marketing activities, like the first time they have a large amount of money to spend, they don't give a fuck if they give a good return on ad spend on that or not. They're just going to go spend that money everywhere. You know what I mean? And I think what makes the difference between somebody who is a good marketer or a bad marketer is no matter how big your budget is, treating it as if it's your last $5. Because like I'm somebody who, I swear to God, I've managed $250,000 monthly budgets on ads successfully. And I've generated millions of dollars in ad revenue, and I can provide references to confirm this. Like, fucking, just because you have a shit ton of money doesn't mean you should blow it. You know what I mean? Spend it wisely. A lot of people go broke because, for example, how many people do you see become millionaires and lose it all because they don't know how to manage the money? A lot of marketers do the same thing with marketing budgets. They tap into somebody that has money that doesn't know about marketing, and then they convince them to spend their money in a lot of different ways that actually don't make any fucking sense. And yeah, you know what I mean? Particularly if there's someone that has a history of bankruptcy. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I don't know. That just kind of got me thinking there. That was a trigger. I was like, yes, I love what he's saying here. No matter how much money you get, don't stop being scrappy and frugal with how you spend it, you know? There's nothing wrong with spending, and I'm not saying don't spend a lot of money on ads if it's a good campaign. I'm saying don't spend a bunch of money for no fucking reason. Like, damn, think about how you're spending it. Don't spend it for vanity. You can spend some money for vanity, but if you're spending all of your marketing budget on vanity, don't be surprised when you don't have a fucking return on ad spend. You know what I mean?
And so, again, a lot of the founding DNA of your company becomes these values, these principles. And so everyone knows if you don't give a crap, you shouldn't be here. And it doesn't mean you have to give a crap, it just means you have to be here. And you also have to be creative. It'd be like kind of like an entrepreneur, super scrappy, and these are some of the values you learn.
Cool. So you guys should start thinking about questions. We're going to open up the questions from the audience, but I have a few more questions for you. So this all sounds nice. The stories are great. People here are a pretty skeptical group. It's a CS department class, probably left brain focused. This feels like a softy kind of right brain focused.
I'm a total softy, sorry.
But how has having a strong culture helped you make important, tough decisions?
Well, I think that having a So here's the thing about culture. There's 3 things they never tell you about culture. The first thing is they never tell you anything. In other words, no one ever talks about culture, and no one ever tells you need to have strong culture. And so, like, there's tons of articles about building a great product. There's tons of articles about like growth and adoption. And there's very few things about culture. It's this like mystical thing that's like kind of soft and fuzzy. That's the first problem. The second problem is it's hard to measure, and things that are hard to measure often get discounted. And these are like two really hard things. But the third thing is the biggest problem. The biggest problem with culture is it doesn't pay off in the short term. In fact, if you wanted to, in 1 year, build a company and sell it as quickly as possible, the number of advice I give you is fuck out the culture, forget about it, just hire people quickly. Culture makes you hire really slowly and makes you be deliberate about decisions that in the near term can slow progress. It's kind of like putting an investment into the company short term. And so these are the things people never tell you. So it's really about building a company for the long term and to endure. Now, some of the things about culture, the first thing is you need to be very clear about what's unique to you that you stand for. Once you do that, you need to make sure you hire people that believe in that. And so we interviewed hundreds of people. You need to make sure that you hire and fire based on the ideas, these values. And one of the things we do is we constantly repeat over and over again. So when we interview, we want to make sure they're world class and they fit the culture. So the first thing I used to ask people, I had at the end of an interview sheet, is if you could hire, this is a functional question, if you could hire anybody in the world, would you hire the person sitting across from you? And if our vision is to become like the best in the world, what we do, why aren't we hiring the very best in the world? So every single person is meant to hire a person better than the previous people. You're constantly raising the bar. You're constantly hiring world class people. Then we have separate people called core values interviewers who aren't in the function. So if you're an engineer, the core values engineers, interviewers are never engineers because we don't want them to be biased and say, oh, I know how good they are. And they interview just for values to make sure that people care about the same thing. And we've said no to a lot of really great people because we just didn't feel right about them being with us long term. So that's one of the things. I also think that maybe some other examples of when we kind of had hard decisions. I've had a kind of in mid 2011 we had this. So we were mostly in the United States, and we had this internet clone funded by these guys called the Samwer brothers. I don't know if anyone heard about these Samwer brothers. They basically they clone Rocket Internet, Vision Public, and they basically copy American websites quickly, and they try to sell it back to you. And if you don't, then they just try to. So it's kind of like putting a gun to your head. And so they had basically done this to Groupon. Groupon at this point was like the fastest growing company in the world ever. First company to $1 billion in revenue. And then they stopped doing Groupon. This is when Groupon's on top of the world, and they cloned us. And we had 40 employees. We had raised $7 million. They cloned us, and they raised $90 million. And in 30 days, they hired 400 people. And they wanted to sell the company, and if they couldn't, they were going to destroy us around the world. And the problem with Airbnb is if we're not everywhere around the world, like a travel site not being in Europe is like your phone not having email. It doesn't actually work. So we were kind of in trouble. And we had this conversation, and there was the pragmatic decision of should we acquire them, and then there was the kind of values decision. The pragmatic one should have probably said buy them because you can't risk losing international. So just guarantee you're going to get international. But we ended up not buying them. And the reason we ended up not buying them is I just didn't like the culture. I didn't want to bring in this 400 people. I felt like we were missionaries and they were mercenaries. I didn't think they were doing it for the beliefs. I thought they were doing it to make a lot of money very quickly. And I believe in a war, missionaries would outlast and outendure mercenaries. And I also felt like the best revenge against an internet clone was just to make them run the company long term. It's like you had the baby, now you gotta raise it. So that's what we ended up doing. And that was a very controversial decision. A lot of people were telling me you should buy this company. We didn't, and I think it worked out.
Let's see, last board meeting, what percentage of revenue comes from Europe?
More than 50%.
I think it worked out.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody have any questions? I can keep going. Yeah. So one other statement we had is that was that culture and brand were two sides of the same coin.
Yes.
Airbnb has a great culture and also a great brand. You want to talk a little bit about branding since it's actually kind of a weak thing in Silicon Valley. We don't tend to focus on this culture and brand.
That's what I actually just said it to the same moment. It's like I think Silicon Valley is not historically really strong, or we don't talk about culture and brand very much. They are two sides of the same coin. So culture, like the principles and the beliefs that you have inside the company that you want people to be aligned with long term. And whatever happens inside the company eventually comes out. You can't hold it in. And brand is really the promise outside the company that everyone identifies with. And so I think having a clear mission and making sure that you know that mission and making sure that mission comes through the company is probably the most important thing you can do for both culture and values. And then the second thing you need to know is that your brand, the way people think about you as a company, is off.
Where he's talking about culture is what is inside of your company, and you can't hold it in very long. It will come out. And where brand is what people think of your company. That ties back to where I was saying, Lieutenant Colonel James Webb would always tell me, perception is reality. And so, that reminds me of that. And it also reminds me of the tenets of brand loyalty tying to brand recognition and brand recall. You know what I'm saying? If somebody can recognize you, then you're second choice. If someone recalls you, you're first choice or last. The difference between recognition and recall. When someone recognizes you, they need a prompt to think of you, but if someone recalls you, they can think of you off the top of their head without a prompt. And so think of it this way: when you go get your deodorant, you know exactly what you're going to go get first, and if that's not there, you know what you might grab second. So that's brand recall and brand recognition right there. And so what he's talking about with brand and culture, I think these are the manifestations internally and externally of how people recognize and recall you. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I appreciate where he's going here.
Often decided by your brand evangelists are your employees. If you have a weak culture, we often think that like companies that hire employees or people that are deeply passionate create companies that customers are really, really passionate about, and those are the companies that have strong brands. And so, Zappos had a really strong brand, a strong culture, and a lot of companies, Google, they care deeply about the culture. They actually have a question: is this person googly? And it's meant to be like a catch-all for a different Google culture. Google's a very strong culture. It's unique to Google.
This is really funny though that he's using Google as an example, because I've been covering their Google monopoly case and all of the internal documentations from that. And I would say Google's culture is more of like, it's a culture of competition, in my opinion, from what we can tell of the emails, but it's also a culture of you have to be in the know and on the pulse, and if not, they're gonna fucking make fun of you, and they're gonna CC a bunch of people on it. You know what I'm saying? But it's also like this point where in some of the emails, you kind of got the lower level employees really kissing ass to the top level employees, kind of begging them for opportunities as well. And so I really do see from the email conversations that we have seen in the Google Monopoly trial, that it's very much a Hunger Games scenario and culture there. Maybe it wasn't always that way. I don't know. Actually, I feel like it's. We looked at emails and conversations between 2007, I think, and 2023. So perhaps before the 2000s, it may not have been as bad, but I feel like from what we can see, maybe because all of this information was not made publicly available until now. So I think also there's a big difference between what people see of Google versus how they treat their employees internally as well, and what that work culture actually is versus what they represent it to be. But for example, they would call like code reds or code yellows, where they would make you work a shit ton to get certain things done, for example. And, you know, so they don't have, in my opinion, a work life divide that is healthy as it relates to personal time. In my opinion, from what I could tell of what I read. But, you know, let's just see what he says. But anyway, just y'all get it. I disagree that Google is a strong culture. And my Monopoly lawsuit playlist is fine.
Google. And by the way, there's no such thing as a good or bad culture. It's either a strong or weak culture. And a good culture for somebody else may not be the culture for you. So I think brand is incredibly important as well. And brand is really the connection of you with your customers. And so if you have an incredibly strong culture, there could be a whole fucking brand. But if you have a really strong culture, then the brand will come through. The final thing to say about brand is a lot of people that talk about their brand, they talk about what they sell. So if you're Apple, one way of doing it is to say we sell computers, and like our new screens are like larger and it's faster, and they talk about bits and bytes. And I remember Steve Jobs had this really important talk where he says the way to win. This is 1996.
Speaking of bytes, this is a terrible joke, but I met a band called 999 Megabytes, but they don't have a gig yet.
When he first came back, wasn't to talk about bits and bytes. The way to win is to talk about what we value. And our core values, we believe people passion can change the world. And that was how we introduced the Think Different campaign. And so Apple, before they had this huge renaissance, just became the most valuable company in the world. They did the Think Different campaign, which is basically saying this is what we believe in. And if you buy an Apple computer, you're also saying I believe in this too. And there has to be, I think, a deeper core belief. And if that doesn't happen, you're a utility. And utilities get sold at commodity prices.
How did you know how to communicate this?
The question is, how do you know how to communicate this to the company, the culture, or core value, or to the employees, to the outside world?
The culture, the values, the brand.
How to communicate what Airbnb does and how it's doing.
Well, so the question is, how do we communicate what Airbnb does in early days? Well, we learned a lot because in the early days, we communicate like it's utility. We actually said Airbnb is a cheap, affordable alternative to hotels. And we had a tagline of forget hotels, save money with Airbnb. And over time, we felt like that was, it was in really early days. We felt like that was way too limiting. That undercut the idea. And so we then eventually changed our tagline to travel like a human, which we haven't kept. But it was basically meant to say that like we believe in a certain kind of world, and we really feel like travel is mass produced. You feel like isolated, you feel like a stranger, and we want to bring the world back to the place where it's a little bit like a village again, where the service is coming.
You know, it's really funny though, because where they intended it to go versus where it is now is kind of different. Like, if you think of it, back, recently there's like all of these different cases where different Airbnb owners are getting called out for how they're mistreating their guests. And a lot of people are now kind of going towards this mindset where they would rather go to a hotel because they don't have to worry about cleaning up after themselves. They don't have to worry about all these rules. It's just like you check in, you check out, and peace. But yeah, I think it is interesting because when Airbnb first came out, before social issues with displacement and short-term rentals were known or maybe occurred, as it relates to this, it was like everybody was so excited, and it was kind of seen as this new thing where you could go travel and still kind of feel a little bit like you were at home because you would have more of a home base to come to. You wouldn't be just in a hotel room where you couldn't cook for yourself and things of that nature. So for some people, it was beneficial. Like if you knew you were going to go somewhere and you wanted to be able to cook for your family and things like that, it could actually save you money and things. But there's so many social issues with it now. I think it's interesting to reflect on what was the intention versus what has been the impact.
From other people, you have this feeling like you belong, and you're actually treated like a human. No matter how successful you are in life, often traveling will remind you you're not that successful. Go through TSA, stay in a typical hotel. Sometimes you'll have some problems, and so we really want to make people feel special. And this was kind of some of the stuff we did in the early days. We did a lot of storytelling. I probably told the story of Airbnb like 10,000 times, and this is something that's kind of related to culture. But somebody asked me the other day, like, what's the job of a CEO? And there's a number of things CEO does, but what you mostly do is articulate the vision. So you articulate the vision, you got to develop a strategy, you got to hire people to fit the culture. If you do those three things, you basically have a company, and that company will hopefully be successful. If you have the right vision, the right strategy, and good people. So what you end up doing is articulating the vision over and over and over again. Whether you're hiring people, or recruiting them, talking to investors, raise money, doing PR interviews. If you're speaking in a class, you're always reinforcing the values. You're doing an email to a customer, and so you just do it thousands of times. And if you do something thousands of times, it will change and get better every time. So it just kind of evolved.
So the users are interacting with the host. So how do you ensure that the hosts are reinforcing the culture of Airbnb?
Very, very good question. How do we make sure the hosts are reinforcing the culture of Airbnb? So when the answer to that is we do a pretty good job, but not yet an amazing job at it. When we first started Airbnb, I kind of took the Craig Newmark school of thought. Craig Newmark's the founder of Craigslist, and I said anybody should be able to use Airbnb. You didn't have to apply. If you want to rent your place, you can rent your place. And it turned out that many of the people believed in our values because we talked about it and we tracked them. But there were people who rented on Airbnb not because they believed in values, but because they realized they can make a lot of money renting their home. And not everyone really was a great culture fit. And these people actually did cause us a lot of problems. So that was actually a bit of a lesson for me. And I didn't think our host had to, I didn't really occur to me in the early days that hosts had to completely fit the values. Now we met them, we tracked people like us. And so over time we've realized hosts are partners. And so they need to believe in the same values we do. And so now we have this program called the Superhost program where they have to demonstrate values to reach this kind of badge, which gets them kind of priority customer support and distribution. We are having this host convention where we bring all the hosts in. We're going to be talking about and reinforcing the values. So the answer is we were really late, but we now do it by reinforcing it every step of the way.
Right now, Airbnb has made some great contributions to the open source.
I think that's an interesting answer though, because I can see how they were attempting, it's a good response, right, in terms of attempting to resolve the issue, and it's a good response for what are you going to do to try and fix this. But when you look at the execution of it today, for example, there was this situation where a bride was kicked out of her Airbnb by the host on the day of her wedding. Because the host didn't like that the bride's bridal party was there to help her get ready. It was fucking wild to see, in my opinion. Shit like that. And there's other situations that I can't properly think of, but very often these Airbnb hosts go viral. And I know there's bad Airbnb guests. I just think that because it would impact their business potentially, not as many hosts are willing to speak out about bad guests than guests are to speak out about hosts, I think, because I don't know if that makes sense, right? But yeah, so just because I'm sitting here complaining about some bad hosts doesn't mean I don't think that, I don't think all Airbnb hosts are bad, and I know that, not all guests are good too. So, but when you can see, if you just Google, bad Airbnb host, Google that, and see how many different situations come up. Let's just take a look here. There's a whole Facebook group for it. So there's different stories people can see. And even Airbnb Community Center has a thread in here about a recent string of bad hosting experiences and things of that nature. So I think where he is going strategically are good ideas and are very good public responses for these issues. But when we look at, and this was from a decade ago-ish, so, at that time, this could be what he was trying to do before seeing the actions of it. But it's interesting to see, what was his intent a decade ago versus the impact a decade later. Did that work? You know what I mean? And I don't believe it may have been as effective as he would have liked, in my opinion, potentially. But maybe it did. Maybe it did reduce. Maybe it was more effective than I'm realizing, and it actually did reduce issues, and I'm just seeing what went public. Who knows? But it's interesting to speculate on.
Do you have any thoughts on how that contributes to the culture on your own?
Yeah, I think just in general, it may be related to two things about Airbnb. We tend to be a pretty open culture, just in general. We communicate a lot, and we generally believe in the idea of a shared world where people are giving back and contributing, making communities and industry stronger. So just my one philosophy on communication is we basically communicate and talk about everything internally except for things that relate to employee or customer privacy. So if it doesn't relate to those two things, we'll basically talk about it. As far as open source culture and engineering, we wanted to make sure that we had a really strong identification of the team, and so we really felt like a lot of source code shouldn't be, we felt like every company needs a moat, some kind of moat that protects you from your competition. We thought some technology would be, but we also felt like we wanted to be able to give back from a technology standpoint. And we preferred our moat to be that we provide the very best experience in the world when you use Airbnb. We have the biggest network effects. And we thought that kind of took precedent over having having certain technology that only we could use. And so we decided to try to share some of that out to people. And I think it does relate to the values. Now, one of the things I never one day recommended, this is hopefully if you have strong culture, I didn't recommend we do any of that. We hired engineers that we felt like the values, and it just independently occurred to them they should do that. They felt like that was the right thing to do.
All the way in the back.
Talked about how during the conventions you didn't have any money and you only helped people visit your site. What did you do to increase the number of users that came to your site? How did you scale that up?
So the question was, Brian had talked about there weren't that many visitors to the site when they were trying to sort of get off the ground. How did they get users to the site?
So this is actually not about culture, but I'll answer anyway. So a lot of people. So the best advice. This is not even a culture question, but the best advice I ever got was probably from Paul Graham. And Paul Graham basically said, I remember he had this line. He said, it's better. He may have even talked about this. He said, it's better to have 100 people that love you than to have 1 million people that just kind of sort of like you. It's literally better to have people love you. And the reason why is if you have a million customers or a million users and they just kind of don't care about you, but they kind of use your app and you're okay, to get them to care is a really, really hard thing. In fact, I don't know how to get a million people to all of a sudden care. What I do know is if you get 100 people that love you, those people, if they feel incredibly passionate, each of them will tell 100 people. And in fact, all movements typically start, or companies or ideas that are really powerful start with just 100 people. So the reason this is so critical is he gave us another lesson, which is if all you need to do is get 100 people to love you, then what you need to do is things that don't scale. So, it's hard to like.
So with the whole concept of, getting 100 people to love you or whatever, that also kind of ties back into conversion rates for me. Because when you think of it, typically on average, 1 out of 100 people will take action with you for any type of broad ad. And so if you have 100 people who have previously taken action with you, then those people are more likely to actually take further actions with you, which increases your conversion rates. So if you can find 100 people who are willing to purchase from you and do business with you, that shows you have a valid business system. Whether or not you can, you have a valid system in place to scale the offer, it does show you have a valid offer to begin with for people to have wanted to purchase from it. And so based on conversion rates, I actually think like that point, like when you got 100 sales, that's when you should start running ads, in my opinion, because a lot of people, they'll have no sales and they'll want to run ads from that, but you don't know if your offer is a good offer to market others to if you haven't sold organically. You need to wait until you can make organic sales and then scale that system, because whatever funnel you have set up for yourself to function and operate organically, when you scale, that's what you're scaling. So if you have no sales to scale, running ads won't get you more sales, it'll just get you traffic in a lot of cases. There's exceptions, but I'm heavily summarizing in terms of if you are struggling with getting sales but you're running ads, this is why. Have you gotten a certain amount of sales for free yet before? And if not, you need to fix your organic system to scale that, because something is not working. You know what I mean? But yeah. And that's what a lot of people don't want to hear.
If you have a million people, you can't meet all of them, but you can meet 100 people. You can spend time with them. And so that's exactly what we did. Joni and I we would go door to door in New York City or in Denver, where the Democratic National Convention was, literally meeting with, staying with, and living with our users. I used to joke that when you buy an iPhone, Steve Jobs didn't come sleep on your couch, but I did. And that was like really critical, like living with your users. And by living with our users and spending time with them, all we had to do was give them enough time, attention, and get them to get to the point where they're deeply passionate. And if you work backwards from 100 people, or even one person, like without even technology, imagine what would be an amazing experience for just this one person, and walk through the journey from the time they like whatever your service is, right? And make it perfect for that one person. Once you make a service perfect for one person, it's actually really easy to make almost anything perfect for a person. It's not actually that hard. The hard thing is then how do we scale to millions of people? Where everyone gets in trouble is to try to solve both at the same time. So the first thing we do is get the perfect experience for one person. We went door to door to do this. We won over their love. Then we use a separate kind of part of our brain to imagine now how will we achieve that at scale. And I'll give you one example before I stop talking about this. Right now on Airbnb, you can, if you put your home on Airbnb, you can click a button and professional, it kind of works like Uber. And we did this before Uber. A professional photographer comes to your house and they'll photograph your homes for free. We have 5,000 photographers around the world, and we photographed hundreds of thousands of homes. So it's probably one of the largest on-demand photography networks, if there was such a thing. I guess probably the only one in the world. And that started with Joe and I. We were staying with this one host in New York City, and her house is amazing, but her photos were terrible. And we said, why don't you put up better photos? And this is before iPhones and great cameras. This was 2008. And she said, well, I can't figure out how to get camera photos from this camera onto this computer. She wasn't very technically savvy. And she said, well, we'll just take photos for you. Or actually, I said, what if you could press a button and somebody just showed up at your door and took professional photographs? That'd be magic. So next day, I knocked on her door and said, I'm here. And I photographed her home. And then we sent emails to people saying, we have this new magical photography service. And if you want, you can press this button and a professional photographer will show up at your home. Someone just press this button, would send me or Joe an alert, and we'd rent a camera in Brooklyn in January 2009, walking through snow, photographing people's homes. We did this by hand without any technology. We managed it with just spreadsheets. I wasn't going to burden Nate with trying to build something we designed before we had photography. Then we started hiring contract photographers. Then eventually we got an intern to manage all the contract photographers. Then we got an intern to become a full-time employee managing other interns to manage the contract employees. And at some point, this is before we built anything. And at some point, there were too many people to manage. There were hundreds of photographers. And then we finally built all the tools to manage all the photography. But we did it only after we knew exactly what the perfect service was. One more question.
So a lot of people say that when the hardest part isn't the technology. Here, the marketing and communication is the hardest part. There may be. And a lot of people say it's not technology, it's marketing.
So, do you want to repeat the question?
So the question is, a lot of people in this particular situation with Airbnb, a lot of people think that this is not necessarily a technology company, but it's more of a marketing company.
Good question. So, I'll answer the question with a story.
Let me preface that question by a set of questions. Do you today have proprietary technology?
Yes.
Do you have a moat?
Yes.
Do you have network effects?
Yes.
Do you have pricing power?
Yes.
Do you have a good brand?
I think so.
Are you a monopoly?
I'm not going to answer that.
but I think similar to the question, just forget.
I think it's interesting, where they're saying that they're a marketing company, because all companies need the function of marketing. Whether or not they utilize it, like how they utilize it is different for every company, but every company, utilizes marketing to some degree. So just because a company does a lot of marketing doesn't necessarily mean that that's their only function. But in a lot of companies with high visibility, the marketing aspect is what you're going to see more of than than what they produced. Because, for example, whenever I throw a show, I'm marketing before the show to sell tickets. I'm marketing the day of to get people in the show that day. And then I am marketing after to get people to come to my next shows. And so for every offer a marketer has, for every offer there is, you're doing 3 times as many campaigns for it in a lot of situations. There's going to be, you can't, a lot of people think, oh, if you build it, they'll come, but not if they don't know about it, And so a lot of what people will see isn't the construction of an offer, it's convincing people to come to it. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of people, because all they see is the marketing and not the back end, they don't understand what a company does in order to make that offer to go to market. I don't know if I'm using the right words. I'm still processing that, but I think you may know what I mean. I don't know.
Forgetting about all of that, companies that have network effects and sort of get off the ground, the flywheel's going. Yeah, people just think that you're lucky.
Yeah, it's a totally fair question, and people said it, so I want to answer it. Guy that runs Sequoia Capital now, his name is Doug Leone. Yeah. One day, I think it's a year and a half ago, Doug Leone says, your job sucks. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? Like, this is like, you got the worst job of any CEO in my portfolio. And I said, tell me why. And this is what he said. He says, well, here's how I think about it. First of all, you're a technology company. And he thought we were a technology company. I would say, at our heart, in many ways, we are a technology company. And so you have all the challenges of all the other portfolio companies. But beyond that, you are in 190 countries. And so you have to figure out how to be international. We have to hire people in countries all over the world. We're literally in every country, North Korea, Syria, and Cuba. You're basically a payments company. We handle billions of dollars through our system every year, and we have to get money transition license in the state of California. So we actually are a payments company. We have serious fraud and risk to warrant. It needs to be locked down like Fort Knox. He said that's usually where companies end. But you got to worry about all this other crap. He said trust and safety. We have 425,000 people staying in other people's beds in their sheets. Think about a woman from Texas staying in the Middle East, or vice versa. The cultural conflicts that could happen and misunderstandings. And you have 425.
I do think it's interesting that the people were like, you're a marketing company. And he said, no, we are a payments company. I think that does show where, just like he was saying at the beginning of this live stream, he was actually trying to just use Airbnb as a tool to make money, and it became the tool to make money. And so here he's saying, no, we're not a marketing company. We are what he said, we're a money company, basically, like where he was talking about like his aspect on the focus on the finances and the profits. Now, to a point, I understand, because the point of doing business is to make money to survive, right? So to a point, I think anybody in business, yeah, that's what the fuck we're doing. We're fucking making money, no shit. But to another point, it's like, when you are countered with, hey, you are a marketing company, and your response is, we don't do marketing, we get money, but you're actually supposed to be in hospitality, it seems to take away the focus from community service, which should be the priority in my opinion, because obviously no business can survive that's not profitable. But in a world where every business exists to make money, I think what can set you apart culture-wise is community focus, in my opinion.
5,000 people a night. It's like being the mayor of Oakland. Now imagine if you're the mayor of Oakland, all the things happen in Oakland tonight. So you've got trust and safety. Now we have regulatory problems. We are in 34,000 cities. Every city has a different law, different rules, and many of them are written in a different century before you had any technology. And so you've got to deal with that. Then you've got issues like search and discovery. So Google's got this brand about being really important about search. The thing about search, though, is usually if I have a question, Google could give me 40,000 results, but it's probably clear that there's like 1 or 2 best options for everybody. So if I want to know a question to an answer, there's usually one best answer. We have 40,000 homes in Paris. There is no best home in Paris for anybody in this room. So we have to be really, really great at matching people and technology. We have to be a company that's just, another example, Facebook, for example, is a digital product. Their product is their website. Our product are these experiences you have in the real world. world. So we're not just an online product, we have to be an offline product. And we need to transition from when you're in your app through cities. And these are just some of the examples why technology, design. So basically the long and the short of it is we have to be world-class at technology, we have to be world-class at design, we have to be world-class at branding because we've got to convince people this isn't crazy, you're not going to die when you use it. We have to convince government this is good for your neighborhood. What happens if the internet moves into your neighborhood? That's what people call it. It's a good thing, hopefully. And you've got to make sure trust and safety is really world-class, that we handle these payments and not have problems with risk. And I can kind of go through. And this is not even to do with culture. I didn't even mention culture. So that's how I describe it. It's like, I think great companies are probably really strong at everything. But we try to hire the very best engineers and technical talent in the world, and I definitely don't see it as a marketing company.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. All right. Thank you, sir.
Oops, I was muted. So that seems to be the end of that. The captions were delayed on that video towards the end there. There seemed to be a timing mismatch, but it did catch up eventually, which is nice. So I think all of that was put in there. So yeah, today's live stream did go a bit longer than I meant it to, my bad. But basically it's just another one of my videos processing value alignment while doing business. We began today, it was kind of a follow-up but in a different direction from last live stream. Last live stream that I did was about standing up for yourself and how law can be a weapon for self-protection or destruction, and I discussed the kind of how I got into working in the legal field and some of the legal actions that have either been taken against me or that I've taken. And in this case, at the beginning of it, I kind of followed up with that in terms of legal action against one of my former employers who used to be an attorney. And so I kind of discussed previously in this live stream about how I believe the work culture of that environment influenced every aspect of my experience there. And also how the work culture of not only that law office, but also the EEOC, Louisiana Workforce Commission, and the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, how the work culture of those environments also is part of the outcome of my case. And so we talked about that, and then from there we have basically spent most of the rest of this live stream, the rest of it, I mean, yeah, whatever, talking about and reacting to the how to start a startup lecture. This is the one on culture. Brian Chesky, the founder of Airbnb, was doing the response, and I believe the lecture was from Alfred Lin, who was the former COO of Zappos and a partner at Sequoia Capital, and they were discussing how to build a great company culture. I agreed with most of what they said. There were a few things I had contention with, but for the most part I agreed with it. They were kind of highlighting how monopolies can be a good way to dominate the market. I disagree with that. And they were also kind of discussing like, he was basically saying that the primary point of his business was to make money, in other words, if I understood that correctly. And it's like, yeah, that's the point of any fucking business, but it just rubs me the wrong way, because I just feel like there should be, like, shouldn't there be more to life than just wanting to make money? And I'm someone who loves to make money. Like, I have ambitions, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to not make money, but in this society, you know what I mean? But like, why do we want to make money? What's the fucking point, right? And when it relates to a lecture on work culture and somebody's asking you like about your marketing and you address it with our money is our focus instead of the community is the focus, it doesn't feel like a culture valued around people. It feels like a culture centered around monetization. So I think that's why it kind of rubbed me the wrong way there. But other than that, like, this lecture I thought was a pretty good, for the most part, lecture as it relates to reflecting on company culture. How do we want to build our lives, and what environment do we want to build our own organization, or who do we want to work for, you know? So yeah, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you guys. I hope everything works out and all that good shit. And I'm gonna just wrap this bitch up because it's been a long one, and I just feel like I'm just, you know, I don't know. But yeah, it's just, yeah, we're here now. And I will see you when I see you. Thanks for watching. Join the loyalty program at noladeafchild.com/loyalty and check in during live streams to get points for rewards.